Welcome to Righteousness from the Heart, a devotional series in which we are studying the Beatitudes in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. I want to begin our study today with a riddle, and here it is. We all need it, but you cannot get it until you have it. Of course, knowing that we are studying today the Beatitude, blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy, in Matthew 5 and verse 7, probably helps to answer that riddle. And the answer, of course, is mercy. Mercy is something we all need. But God teaches us that we cannot receive it unless we are willing to extend it to others. As we begin our study of this Beatitude today, I think it is important for us to notice the relationship of the Beatitudes that have gone before it. It's necessary to see the Beatitudes as a unit, as working together. And this is certainly evident in a study of the need for mercy. The first Beatitude, blessed are the poor in spirit. Before you are able to see the needs of others and be sympathetic toward those needs, you have to be able to see yourself in that condition. It is very likely that an unmerciful person has missed the meaning of poor in spirit. The next Beatitude, blessed are they that mourn. We must understand the true effect of sin in our lives and in the lives of other people. And then blessed are the meek. We cannot be self-willed, but rather we must take an interest in the lives of other people. Without this quality, mercy will be missing. And then, blessed are they that hunger and thirst for righteousness. We must see what our true needs really are. And when all of this is present in our lives, then we are in a position to extend mercy to others. So what does it mean to be merciful? And very basically, it is to see with sympathy the needs of others. Mercy requires for us to be willing to, if you will, get inside the other person, to see things from his viewpoint and to think as he thinks. Mercy is something that is extended to those who hurt, to those who are in misery. And frankly, those of us who live in affluence, it's very difficult for us to see that condition in others. As we study this Beatitude, I want you to think about the way Jesus used an Old Testament passage to drive home the point for the need of mercy. That passage is in Hosea chapter 6 and verse number 6, where God, through the prophet, says to his people, "For I desire steadfast love and not sacrifice." Now the phrase steadfast love in the English Standard is translated mercy in the King James. And indeed, the word throughout the Old Testament is translated either steadfast love or mercy. And so God says, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, the knowledge of God rather than burnt offerings. Through the prophet Hosea, God told his people what he wanted from them. And it was not simply that they would offer sacrifices, that they would give burnt offerings, but instead God wanted their loyal and faithful love, both toward him and also extended toward other people. Sadly, what they were doing often passes for religion. They were observing the outward form, but the heart was void of righteousness, and their lives were filled with wickedness. It was true in the day of Hosea, it was true in Jesus' day, and sadly it's true in our day. And a sure sign of the lack of that kind of religion is the lack of mercy toward the downtrodden and the poor. Now, I said I wanted to look at two passages where Jesus quotes that. The first one is in Matthew chapter 9, and it begins in verse number 10. Matthew 9, verse 10. This is right after Jesus has called Matthew to be an apostle. And they go to the home of Matthew where they have a feast. And verse 10 says, as Jesus reclined at table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came and were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. And when the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" But when he heard it, he said, "Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy and not sacrifice, for I came not to call the righteous, but sinners." And so here's Jesus at the home of Matthew. Tax collectors and sinners are coming. They're sitting with Jesus, eating with him. And here are the scribes and the Pharisees. They look down their self-righteous noses at these people as if they are above sin, as if they have no need of forgiveness. And they couldn't understand why Jesus would associate with people like that. And so Jesus said, "I didn't come to call righteous. I came to call sinners." But if you'd understood what this means, "I'll have mercy, not sacrifice," you would not have said that. And so here Jesus emphasizes the fact that those in the condition of tax collectors and sinners needed mercy from those around them. The second passage is 3 chapters over in Matthew chapter 12, and it begins at verse 1. This is when Jesus and his disciples are walking through a grain field. And the passage says that his disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck heads of grain and to eat. But when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." He said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, and those who were with him? How he entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which it was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests. Or have ye not read in the law how on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are guiltless? I tell you, something greater than the temple is here. And if you had known what this means, I desire mercy and not sacrifice, you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord of the Sabbath." Now, often people will go to this passage and a passage like it to try to support the idea of situation ethics. And they will say that Jesus was teaching that what these people did, whether it was right or wrong, was determined by the circumstances or the situation. But that is simply not what Jesus was doing. He was not teaching situation ethics. Jesus never taught that. In fact, what he was doing was accusing these people of being inconsistent. You notice that he said of David, when he ate the bread of the presence that he was not supposed to eat, that it was not lawful for him to eat. And he said of the priest that did their duties around the temple on the Sabbath day, that they were guiltless. What he's saying to these people is, you're inconsistent. You would justify David just because of who he is, while at the same time, you accuse my disciples of doing something sinful when they were not violating the law. The actions of the disciples were in keeping with what the law said concerning those who are poor. For example, in Deuteronomy 23 and verse 25, the Old Testament law said, if you go into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the ears with your hand, but you shall not put a sickle to your neighbor's standing grain. And so the poor were able to walk through the grain field, and they could, with their hands, gather some grain and eat it. The law made provisions like this, just like the law made provisions for the priests to do their duty at the temple, even on the Sabbath day. But because of their self-righteousness, these Jewish leaders could not see that. And so listen again to what Jesus said to them. In both instances, he said, you need to understand this passage. I desire mercy and not sacrifice. The sacrifices of the law that God commanded were intended to teach these people a lesson, to teach those who offered sacrifices of their own sinfulness, and of their own need for God's grace and mercy and forgiveness. And then, growing out of that, they should have been willing to offer mercy to those around them. The religious people of Jesus' day, the scribes and the Pharisees, failed to learn that lesson. And that's the reason that they were unmerciful. You and I need to take a warning from this passage. It is not enough to be religious. We must take care lest our religion is like theirs, in outward form only, and not from the heart. See, these Pharisees were religious people, but they were not righteous people. Listen to the rebuke that Jesus gave in Matthew 23, in verse number 23. He said, "Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For you tithe mint and dill and cumin, and have neglected the weightier matters of the law, justice, mercy, and faithfulness. These ye ought to have done without neglecting the other." It should be evident that Jesus is not in any way overlooking sin. There's no compromise. There's no encouraging of sinful practices when we extend mercy as God has commanded. Right here in this verse, these ye ought to have done. The tithing that they talked about they were doing, he said you should have done this. But you should not have neglected the weightier matters. You remember his statement to the woman in John 8 who was caught in the act of adultery when her accusers left because of their own problems as far as their heart. Jesus said to her, "Go, and from now on sin no more." He didn't encourage sinfulness, but he did extend mercy. And we need to be sure that we learn that lesson. Think about the times in the gospel accounts where Jesus was moved with compassion towards so many different people, the multitudes that had no leadership, the blind, the sick, lepers, all of these different people, Jesus extended mercy. He taught it. He taught it often. The parable of the Good Samaritan shows the beauty of mercy in what the Samaritan did for that man who was beaten. And likewise, the parable of the unforgiving servant shows the ugliness of life without mercy. The attitude of mercy is taught throughout the New Testament. For example, look at Ephesians 4 and verse 32, where the Apostle Paul says, "Be kind one to another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, as God in Christ forgave you." Mercy. We need it, and we can receive it if we develop the heart that is taught here in the Beatitudes and be merciful to others. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. I'm so glad that you've joined me in this study, and it's my prayer that it's been helpful to you. Please join me again as we continue our study of the Beatitudes and see what is involved in righteousness from the heart. And until next time, may God bless.